Now let's take a look at the front pages for you. The Daily Mail claims Amazon is taking us for fools after it was revealed the online giant has nearly halved its corporation tax bill to £4.5 million. That is despite sales rising to £2 billion.
The new head of the armed forces, Sir Nick Carter, tells the Daily Telegraph that soldiers who served in Northern Ireland had done a remarkable job in securing peace and says they should only be investigated if they have done something wrong.
And The Guardian shows a picture of the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern returning to work 6 weeks after giving birth. It also reports on the blunt rebuke from the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, that the UK's Brexit proposals threaten the future of the European single market.
Joining us is the former Home Secretary Jacqui Smith and political commentator and broadcaster Iain Dale. Good morning to both of you. So picking up on it, let's start with Brexit because, of course, Theresa May cutting her holiday short to go and spend time with Emmanuel Macron at his presidential retreat to try and have talks to sort of, smooth the way, to see if she can persuade him about Chequers' plan. Do we think that this tactic will work?
Look, if anybody needs a holiday, Theresa May does, bless her. But she also needs to get the Brexit deal sorted. And this is obviously part of the idea of going, if you like, over the Commission and Michel Barnier to the leaders of each of the European countries to try to sell. I mean, I'm not quite sure what she is selling now, seeing as she seems to have unravelled the Chequers deal that she did. But, if she's going to stand any chance of getting a deal, I think it's probably the right tactic to try and appeal to leaders.
But, yeah, I mean, they've already said, haven't they? The French presidential aide has come out and said, oh, hold on a second, this isn't going to be separate to any of the negotiations.
What they say in public is often very different to what they say in private. And her agenda there, as Jacqui says, is to persuade Macron that excuse me, Michel Barnier is being too dogmatic, that he's not really got the interests of the EU at heart in the way that he's negotiating. It was interesting that yesterday he wrote an article in 20 different European newspapers being very dogmatic and saying that Britain's proposals are undermining the single market. And you think, well, why has he done that on the second day of August when the whole of Brussels is on holiday, the day before she meets President Macron? So he was sending quite an important message from his point of view, because a lot of European leaders do think that he's being too dogmatic and that they want to come to a deal because it's in no one's interests, theirs or ours, for there not to be a deal in October.
Jacqui, you've sat at the top table of politics when you were in the cabinet, of course. And how will the leaders of the various countries that Theresa May is going to visit individually be taking that experience? Is it getting any traction whatsoever? Will it be playing to their egos that she's come to talk to them face to face and upsetting Barnier and just saying,
I don't think it's about ego, but it is the right thing to do. Remember, you've got the Commission, but you've also got the Council of Ministers that is extremely important.
And they're the ones that will decide in the end.
Well, between them. And I think it is the right tactic, if you want to get a deal, to appeal to the leaders. But this just tells you how massively complex this is. You've got the negotiation going on with the Commission. You've got 27 different leaders who may well take different positions on this. And this is all going to be sorted by October, November. I'm sorry, but I just cannot see that happening.
Barnier himself says they're 80% of the way there. Yeah. I mean, there are some quite complicated things left to decide, Northern Ireland being one. But it's not impossible. What I'm hearing is that Angela Merkel wants there to be a separate summit in November, so to give a little bit more time. And she says, look, this is important, both for Britain and the EU, so let's have a proper summit where we all come together. And we all know what happens at EU summits. In the end, they do come to a deal right at the last minute, and I suspect that's what's going to happen here.
OK, we'll wait and see what results come from, a few conversations over some glasses of rosé, whether that has any impact on the future. Well, time will tell. Meanwhile, let's turn to something else politically that's talking about today, which is the new Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter, is saying about Northern Ireland veterans. And he has said that on his watch, it will not happen that vexatious claims are taken through. But on the other hand, there are people saying, well, how do you know it's a vexatious claim unless it's been investigated? We've got all of this being discussed at the moment as to whether there should be a statute of limitations for veterans.
I mean, it's a good thing if the Chief of Defence Staff is standing up for our armed forces. And I agree with him when he says that, our soldiers in Northern Ireland were enormously brave and did a very important job in bringing peace. But you're absolutely right. What he actually seems to have said is people won't be investigated if they haven't done anything wrong. Well, part of the way that you maintain confidence in our armed forces to be actually that level above some others in terms of the appropriateness and the way in which they behave is, if you think something has happened, to investigate it. Now, I think he's right. If you know that somebody is vexatious, you shouldn't drag people through an investigation because of that. But unless there is some sort of investigation, how do you know whether or not something has happened or not?
I'm sorry, we have let out all the IRA terrorists under the Good Friday Agreement, which a lot of us had a bit of an issue with at the time.
But it
has brought peace. Well, no, they were guilty of terrorist crimes and they were let out of prison. So, and now we're suggesting that men in their 70s should be investigated for so-called crimes sort of 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's utterly preposterous. It's not treating our armed forces in the way that they should be treated.
Isn't part of the reason why our armed forces, and we, in fact, are respected around the world, is because we do expect the highest possible standards of behaviour from them. And if we're going to continue with that respect, we need to maintain that.
Right, well, put all the IRA terrorists back in prison,
you know, as you say, that was an important part of the peace negotiations.
Well, so
but this
should not be allowed to happen.
What, you don't think if there was evidence that a member of our armed forces had done something that was inappropriate by our standards, you don't think that should be investigated?
No, because it's basically history now. What is going to be gained by doing this?
Even Sir Nick Carter has said if there is evidence that something was done, something was done badly, was done wrong, there should be an investigation.
I mean, are you arguing for a sort of blanket amnesty?
Because it would have to include
absolutely
everybody,
am
wouldn't
arguing.
it? It would have to include terrorists in that case, because
it does include terrorists. They were all let out of jail. So I am saying that there should be a blanket amnesty.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about some other vexatious claims. It tends to happen quite a lot when President Trump talks.
Surely not.
He was at a rally in Pennsylvania yesterday, talking about his visits to the UK. To Britain, Great Britain, they call it sometimes, England, a small part of it. We'll come to that. But apparently, because, of course, we all are led to believe that he kept the Queen waiting. This was his take on the scenario.
So I was about 15 minutes early, and I'm waiting with my wife, and that's fine. Hey, it's the Queen, right? We can wait. But I'm a little early. So I then go up and meet the Queen, and she is fantastic. We then go up and we have tea. And I didn't know this. It was supposed to last for 15 minutes, but it lasted for like an hour because we got along. So I was late and I overstayed. And honestly, folks, it was such a beautiful, beautiful visit and afternoon. But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
Oh, well, we've got an update, though, because you say that's not true. So he's his own fake news.
Well, but some of it's true and some of it isn't true, which is what you normally get with Donald Trump. He did not meet with the Queen for an hour. It was 40 minutes. But he's right in this, 10 minutes longer than it was supposed to have been. So...
he said it was supposed to be 15 minutes, though, so that makes it...
Well, he's a liar.
It's as simple as that for you, Jacqui, is it? Yeah.
And you know, we'd forgotten how ignorant he was when he came to the UK, and now he's reminded us again, of course. But more fundamentally than that, you know, this constant calling of the news fake is a fundamental undermining of the democratic principles of the US. And earlier on in the day, his spokesperson was challenged on several occasions, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, to say, do you really think the media is the enemy of the people? And she would not say that she didn't believe that. That is a really that's a dangerous place to put yourself.
I suppose the issue is then also people just don't know, they just don't trust anything then, do they? Because everything's getting...
That's what he wants to
criticised,
It's very easy, isn't it, for him to turn around and be the loudest and shout in the most grand way. I was being very sort of flippant when I was talking about Britain and the UK, but this is the quote that Jacqui was just suggesting about his ignorance, because this is what he said about the UK.
People call it Britain, they call it Great Britain, they used to call it England, different parts. But the UK, great respect.
What do you make of the way he just flippantly throws out these things that he's kind of brushing over in terms of detail, which, of course, is hugely insulting to everybody here in the UK?
Well, to be fair to Donald Trump, and I do sometimes like to be fair to Donald Trump, Americans do have a problem, and I think some people in this country... You said, what is the difference between the United Kingdom and Great Britain? A lot of people wouldn't be able to explain that. And most Americans do call the whole country England, which, of course, offends people in Wales, Scotland and
But that's
Northern
the
Ireland.
last thing you need the president to be saying, isn't it? I mean, he should have
He's not
all
just-
people.
Well,
He's just been meeting the Queen.
He's
And actually,
got no
this came up
filter,
before
has he?
in his interview with peers that they'd already discussed this, and he obviously still hasn't got exactly which bit is which and what it refers
I
to.
think what Donald Trump suffers from is fake memory syndrome, where he remembers something, but he remembers it in his own way.
his
he
version of
convinces
it.
himself that he's right. Even it's like when he said that he predicted the result of the Brexit referendum because he was over in Scotland the day before the referendum. It turned out, as we all know now, and it's easy to fact-check, that he was here the day after the referendum.
Lots of people who are liars think they're telling the truth. It doesn't stop them being liars, does it?
No, I'm not saying that.
And
It's
sadly,
quite
very successful politicians along the way as well, and you know, in all
Yeah.
walks of life.
Who just happen to be in incredibly powerful positions.
I don't think most... No, this is the point. I don't think most politicians are liars.
Do you not?
Even when I
At
disagree
some
with
point?
them, I don't think they lie instinctively like Donald Trump does. I think that's different.
I had to spend 2 hours presenting a live radio show on College Green outside Parliament with a protester about 10 yards behind me shouting, "All politicians are liars," literally for 2 hours without stopping. So that is a phrase that means a lot to me.
It resonates. It sends a shiver down your
very
spine.
endearing.
Oh my
Chills,
God,
yeah.
yeah.
Jacqui, Iain, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.